Okay, so as you may have been told, and obviously you know why you're here, we're going to be talking about reintroducing free play, and can the largest organizations, such as Major League Baseball, help drive the reorganization of that. But we want to start out with a terrific young man named Jeremy Silberglied, who's an 8-year-old. Is Jeremy here? Give a warm welcome to Jeremy here. Come on over here. Have a seat right here. Now, Jeremy's 8 years old, and he's from right here in this area, in Rockville, and plays in a program called Sports Plus. Is that right?
Yep.
What can you tell us about Sports Plus?
Well, I could tell you that it's a program that you let everyone play. It's very nice, and not much people exercise in this world, but Sports Plus has an opportunity for everyone. Even girls get to exercise. No, really.
That's
a
good thing, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing.
That's a good thing. We should let you know, Sports Plus helps to serve kids with mild to moderate on the scale of autism, on the spectrum of autism. And you've been doing this for how long?
More than a year.
More than a year. Yeah. What kind of sports do you play?
Well, I like to play soccer. That's my favorite.
Mm-hmm. And did you play any soccer before you got into Sports Plus, or they introduced you to the sport?
I played soccer before.
Mm-hmm. And did you like it before, or do you like it better at Sports Plus? What do they do differently with soccer?
Well, they let everyone play, and I noticed that...
That's important, right? Letting everybody play.
Yeah.
Because before you were part of Sports Plus, was everybody allowed to play? Or only the ones that they thought were better?
Well, I think it's the other way around from Sports Plus, if you ask me.
That before you were part of Sports Plus, they only let the best kids play, and sometimes that wasn't fair?
Well, sometimes. That didn't really happen. They let everyone play, but not as much as Sports Plus did.
Mm-hmm. And do they do it, do they play games? Do they keep score in Sports Plus, or is it more about instruction for you?
It's more about passing the ball, but yeah, they sometimes do. But
what do you like about sports, Jeremy?
Well, I like to be forward in most sports. Sometimes I like to be goalie in sports like soccer, hockey, maybe lacrosse, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But usually...
Do you like just being out there, mixing?
Well, yeah, I like the outdoors more than the indoors.
You're not a big video game guy?
No, I don't even know what that is.
Video games?
Well, I heard of it.
That's a good thing, actually.
I heard of it, actually, but I don't really do it.
I think we're all surprised, pleasantly surprised to hear that, and we love that, right? Everybody loves the fact that he likes to be outside. What other sports besides soccer?
Well, I play gym hockey.
You do?
I'm not very good of a skater.
That doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I think that's part of what we're all talking about here today, which is the ability to play freely, and just even if you want to participate, you get a chance to do it, even if maybe you're not the best at it.
Yeah.
Have you made a lot of friends through Sports Plus and playing sports?
Oh yeah, I met a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that sports is something that will be part of your life for a long time?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's great. Do you have a message here for everybody else? Because I'm sure a lot of people here have children as well. What would you tell them and how they should help their kids?
That they should try to play outside for at least an hour, at least 60 minutes a day.
That's terrific. Do you do that?
Well, yeah, it goes from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I do play an hour a day. And even if I don't have that class, I exercise a lot.
A lot? When you play at Sports Plus, is there a lot of instruction? Is there a lot of adult supervision, or do they let you generally do things on your own?
It's really the first one you said, that they have us do stuff and then we do it. So
It's more organized?
it's more instructional
It's more instructional.
than free play.
And do you do some free play at home? I know you've got
Oh yeah.
twin siblings at home who are 2 years younger than
Yeah,
you. Do
but
you
how
play with
did
them?
you know?
How do I know?
Yeah.
Little birdie told me.
What?
You want to tell us the names of your siblings?
Well, one's name is my sister. Well, I have a sister and brother, but my sister's name Jamie and my sister's name Evan.
And do you play sports with them?
Yeah, but my sister's not really into sports.
But maybe you can get her into sports.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
That'd be
No,
great.
really, I am.
We believe you. Jeremy, thank you so much. It was so nice to have you here. Really appreciate it. You're a terrific young man.
Yeah.
You can go out that way, I think, right over there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God, that's great. No video games. I love that. I'm supposed to ask you at this point, if you will, and pardon my glasses here, if you will take out your devices, because you're now going to get to vote. And if you will refresh your browser, and we're going to take about a minute or two to do this as our other panelists take the stage. But you can go, and here's the question. What grade do you give stakeholders in encouraging free play for kids? So if you go to your browser and you plug in Pulse, and it'll be as.pn/pp7. Has everybody got that? And again, the question is, what grade do you give stakeholders in encouraging free play for kids? I'll say it again, as.pn/pp7. We'll take about a minute or so to do that. And in the meantime, we can start to bring out, and we'll tally it up. And we're also going to put the same question to our panelists, who we want to bring out right now. They can stroll out as they wish, but we'll bring out Caitlin Cahow, who is a two-time Olympic medalist with U.S. Women's Hockey, a member of the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. Warm welcome for Caitlin. If you can. Dr. Neeru Jayanthi, who's the Director of Tennis Medicine at Emory University, a recent transplant from Chicago down to the warm weather, a big tennis player himself. He is a leading researcher on overuse injuries in young athletes and a proficient 5.0 tennis player himself. Chris Marinak, who is the Senior Vice President for League Economics and Strategy for Major League Baseball. He oversees MLB's Play Ball and other youth initiatives, and played 4 years of baseball at the University of Virginia. And Jason Collins, who is a 13-year veteran of the NBA. He's part of the NBA Cares program, and he's also part of the President's Council. Jason Collins. And any of you who are from the West Coast know that he grew up in the LA area, went to Harvard Westlake, played his college basketball at Stanford. Is that good enough? Warm welcome to all of you guys. All right, how are we doing on voting? You guys all tapped in? Can we get a tally on this? Oh boy, that screen's going to be way too far. Can any of you read that?
58% D.
Huh?
58% D.
58% a D. Wow. Got some angry people. Why don't you guys each give us a grade for where we stand on free play from what you observe in youth sports today?
A grade. Can you give me the grading metrics again?
Well, it's really the question is where do you guys stand and you, I say in general, is what grade do you give stakeholders in encouraging free play for kids?
Well, I mean, I'm glad we're here having this conversation because I think one of the major challenges is, youth sports have really developed considerably over the last years, is making sure that there are the opportunities for free play, that there are safe spaces for kids to just go out and be kids and participate and play and be active. And I think youth sports opportunities certainly are there and available. There's definitely more that we can be doing to provide free play opportunities to kids.
We'll get into each of your personal experiences, but give us a grade. Neeru.
Yeah, I would give it D. We had about 1,200 Chicagoland area athletes, and we actually looked at the number of organized hours per week of sports versus their free play, and I was curious, and it was about 2 to 1, twice as many as free play in today's environment. I think that was probably the reverse for many of us a few years back, about 20, 30 years back. So I think we're going the opposite direction.
Chris, any grade inflation on your part after the D from Neeru?
No, I mean, I think that we struggle with it. I think the reason why we've looked at it a lot from Major League Baseball standpoint, and I think one of the issues you have is that the people who are running organizations now, they're 30, 40, 50 years old, and so they look back and say, well, what did I do when I was a kid, right? And they say, when I was a kid, everybody just figured it out. You just found some people in the neighborhood and you've played. And so, well, why can't kids today do that? And I think that the tough part is you have to basically, as an administrator, put yourself in the shoes of kids today and realize, hey, their lives are different. Kids have cell phones, they have social media, they have more structure in their lives. Parents expect that they're going to get regular updates of what their kids are doing. And so I think as administrators, we need to not just say, oh, well, why don't kids do what we used to do when we were kids? They need to put systems in place that support the current structure. And so, for example, in terms of encouraging free play, it's encouraging free play, but it's actually putting some structure behind it. So, for example, one of the programs that we just launched this year at Major League Baseball is called the Junior Home Run Derby. And it's very much a free play event. You don't have to be on a team. You don't have to sign up in advance. You just show up as a solo player, and you get to play home run derby with a bunch of kids from your community. And that's free play. People may not think of it as free play because they think free play is, you got to go down to the kid in your neighborhood and get 6 kids from your community together. But if we as administrators can help set up structures that encourage free play, I think that's what the current generation is looking for because that's what they're used to. It's just a different world today than it was, 20, 30 years ago.
Jason, would you agree with that? You want to give us a grade and your assessment?
I think I'll add to what my colleague said, but the one great thing about basketball is you don't need a lot of kids. You can play, one-on-one, you can play 3-on-3, 5-on-5. There's so many different options with the sport of basketball, which is why I loved, playing when I was growing up.
And would you say that your background was more rooted in going down to the local court and playing pickup, or how quickly did you get introduced to playing organized, structured?
I first got introduced to playing basketball when I was around 6 years old. Now, mind you, I was probably 4'10". I was a little tall for a 6-year-old. And for those who don't know, I have a twin brother, and he is now an assistant coach with the Golden State Warriors. So we actually went right up our street, and there was a neighbor of ours who had a basketball hoop hanging outside of his garage, and that was our introduction to basketball. And as we got older, we went to the rec league to get a little structure to learn the rules of the sport, because as a young player, and now I'm watching my nieces and nephew, they're 7, 5, and 3, you sort of make up the rules a little bit. You watch it on TV, but you don't necessarily know, okay, double dribbling versus traveling versus all of that.
You were just telling me that even at their ages, 7, 5, and 3, that they're already in a more structured, or at least learning the rules rather than simply rolling the balls out and letting them play.
We started them at home with the hoop, and that's the great thing also about basketball. All you need is a hoop and a ball, and you can sort of make up the rules as you go. But in order to get structure to really understand the sport, as you're young, it's important to learn the fundamentals of the sport. It's just a lot harder to learn the fundamentals when you get older. So it's important to also, it's a great social game. And another sport that I love is tennis. And Neeru's connected. I was talking with Neeru. There's that tennis is very similar that you can play 1-on-1, 2-on-2. You don't need a lot of people, and it's a great social sport as well.
Caitlin, hockey obviously has a great deal of structure to it. You need players, although I suppose you could play one-on-one. How did you grow up to where you became a two-time Olympian?
Well, I mean, I think Jason spoke about fundamentals. Obviously, there are certain fundamentals like skating that are integral to hockey. But for me, I spent, countless hours in, my driveway with neighborhood kids playing street hockey, playing ball hockey, just playing. I mean, that's how I spent my time. And rink time was precious. I mean, ice time is expensive, hockey equipment is expensive. All of these things are factors. And obviously, the goal is to make these things more accessible to all people, and so everyone can enjoy the sport. But for me, where I found so much enjoyment growing up was really just playing with my friends, playing in the backyard, experiencing the game in a different environment, and that helped me hone my skills. You can still stick handle with a ball, with a tennis ball in your driveway, and you can still pick up some of those fundamentals there too. And at the same time, you're engaging with your friends, you're socializing, you're gaining confidence, you're staying active. I mean, those were things that I loved about play when I was growing up. They were really important to me.
And when you had these games in the backyard or out on the street, it wasn't parents organizing, it was just simply you calling a friend and saying, or everybody knew when gathering time was.
Right, it was pretty much you get home from school and you knew that, the kid across the street was going to want to play, and you wanted to play, and you were out there, until you got brought back in for supper or whenever. I mean, but I was very fortunate that I had that neighborhood, I had that environment, and I think that's why it's so important that a lot of our focus has to be on creating safe spaces for kids. Community, just communities that support these types of activities for kids, where parents can feel safe about having their children participating in these sorts of activities, and kids can feel confident about joining in. And it has to be an inviting kind of space. You need to, as hard as it is, I mean, Jason talked about it, we've all spoken a bit about it, it's a challenge for parents now in this day and age with all of the media that we have, with sort of the digital environment that we live in. It's sometimes very difficult for kids to jump in and engage in new ways. So it's so important that we encourage kids and provide these spaces and encouragement for them to get in the game, no matter what it is.
Neeru, I think we all agree, and pretty much everybody in this room, that's why they're here, is that we long for the days of our own youth when you could just run down to the local ballpark. And as Chris pointed out, well, that's not the world we live in today. We can't keep telling our kids milk costs 5 cents. But there are true benefits and cons to kids having free play and structured sports, right, from the work that you've done.
So we have great athletes here who have great anecdotal stories, which are probably the most helpful for us understanding this concept. I'm trying to give some data to some teeth to this argument or this discussion. And so when we looked at some of the data, we said, look, we're taking today's youth. It's not going to be like it was 20 or 30 years ago. Again, their sports training ratio is what we call it, how much organized sports you do versus how much free play. On average is about 2 to 1. If you exceeded that, your risk of not only overuse injury, but serious overuse injury would increase significantly. In fact, in some sports like tennis, they were about 4 or 5 to 1. And I see many examples of 16 to 20 hours a week with 0 hours of free play. So while it's not 20 or 30 years ago, we've moved quite a bit in the other direction where we are seeing less and less of it. The best example of how it should be potentially done is when we look at socioeconomic status and their free play and specialization. We found that as kids came from homes with higher median incomes and better insurance, their sports training ratios always exceeded or significantly exceeded the 2 to 1 ratio, and they had more serious overuse injuries. The kids with the least resources and the lowest socioeconomic status actually had the highest amount of physical activity, the lowest amount of sports training ratio, and the highest amount of free play. And they did not get serious overuse injuries. So they're actually protected. The more free play that kids were doing, these are the kids that are playing basketball in the park and doing things for fun, was protective of injury, even if they were actually doing more hours per week of participation. So I think there is, in today's youth sports environment, still quite a bit to say about the self-regulation of kids and letting them do what they want to do.
Do we see a difference in gender, too, when it comes to free play, boys versus girls? And Jason, you can jump in on this, too, as you get out and as you're an ambassador for the NBA, when you see girls, are they as willing to to engage in free play?
Yeah, there are definitely some issues with trying to, we are at the NBA, we're trying to encourage everyone to play, to participate in basketball. The Junior NBA is a new program that's partnered with Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCA, and it's free, open to everyone. Trying to encourage everyone to play basketball, to be physically active. And on the President's Council, we have a new 0 to 60 program. So I see basketball as a way for kids to be active and in a safe space on a basketball court. Community supporting it, NBA supporting it, adding to the structure of the sport.
Chris, you addressed this right off the top, but it does seem counterintuitive. Yes, we live in a different world, but it seems counterintuitive that behind the effort to get more kids involved in free play, we've got to get some of the biggest organizations and sports leagues in America to facilitate this. Yep. Why can't we simply roll out the balls and say, get off the couch and turn off the TV?
You know, some places do that, but I think the trick is that today parents expect more, and they expect more organization, especially because of the amount of access that they have to their kids. They know what their kids are doing all the time, and when they go to these different events, you know, they want to get an email report as to, you know, what the kid was doing. And, you know, like one of the most successful programs we've seen with Little League is that they've actually created a social media application where when a kid comes home from practice, they get a download as to what they did, so the parents are aware. And I think it just goes back to what the expectations of parents are. You know, our parents were just happy to get us out of the house, you know, and run down the street. And you know, there was a safety factor there with just being in from kids in your community. And I think that there's not as much of that today. And so what parents are looking for is they're looking for reputable organizations. They're looking for large, you know, structures and organizations that they trust, and the leagues are, you know, organizations like that. The Junior NBA program, and I won't speak for Jason, but the whole concept there is that the NBA's brand now gives credibility to all these mom and pop, you know, basketball organizations across the country. We have the same sort of model with some of our programming in baseball, particularly in inner cities, where we leverage the Major League Baseball brand to basically tell parents, hey, this is a reputable program. You know, you're not sending your kid to some area that's uncontrolled or organization that's uncontrolled. You know, Major League Baseball is behind this, and so you should be able to trust that. And I think that giving parents that trust factor makes them more willing to let their kids go out and have a good time, have fun.
One added incentive is, I remember being a little kid and loving the sport of basketball, having heroes, and being able to meet Byron Scott and Magic Johnson growing up in Los Angeles. So through Junior NBA, if you're affiliated with Junior NBA, they'll bring in the local NBA players to interact, and sometimes kids will have an opportunity to meet their local hero, their favorite basketball player, you know, inspire them that much further to continue on the path of you know, being in sports.
Is it just the societal demands and that the world has changed, or is this the trickle-down effect of kids wanting to be on the ATP tour, the WTA tour, wanting to be Olympians, and so parents feel like they have no choice but to get their kids specializing early, and that means they need structure and they need coaching from the time they're 5, 6, and 7 years old?
There's an old British study that looked at elite athletes. It's about 20 years old now, and then the most likely reason for a kid to choose a sport was the parent, to be introduced to a sport. The most likely reason to intensify their training was the coach. And so that becomes a common issue. You hand over the kid at some point to the coach to decide what level of training, what is that path to success. But we've handed it over and we haven't taken it back in most cases. In other words, the parents are taking away their own responsibility for their child to engage them in other areas. And that's some of the stuff we're looking into, is what is the parent-child interactions now and how healthy, how many times a week are you exercising with your own child because you're feeling like the coach can direct you to that path to success.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is it's trying to get college scholarships. You know, the cost of college is so much more expensive than it was, you know, 20, 30 years ago. And so, I mean, we see this in survey research that parents of 6-year-olds are saying, I'm going to try to get my kid to focus. He seems really good at basketball, so I want him to focus in on basketball because maybe he'll be able to get a scholarship. And you know, that it's actually counterintuitive because of the point that you were making. we see that we actually get better athletes when they play multiple sports because they actually build a more well-rounded athletic profile than a person who, when they focus in at an early age, they only really focus in on the skills that are required in that sport. And so they're just not as good of athletes, you know, when they specialize early.
That's a really good point, Chris. I mean, I think in my experience as coaching, I've had parents come up to me of young kids and just saying, you know, what do I need to do to get my daughter, you know, into college and playing at the college level? Or what do I need to do? What does my daughter need to do to be on the path to becoming an Olympian? And it's always very surprising to me because I can't remember ever having that conversation with my parents growing up.
And you played a lot of sports growing up,
I
didn't
did,
you?
yeah. I played a lot of sports. I actually played a year of lacrosse in college as well. I played 3 sports in high school. I mean, I was just the kind of person, I loved being an athlete. You know, being a student athlete was totally what I was about, and that's, it's had such a huge impact on my life, the ability to be an athlete and to participate and grow through sports participation, that I hate to see it when kids start to specialize too early and then they burn out, because that's something that does happen, and the whole purpose of sport is to teach you so many of these lessons just about yourself and about life that you wouldn't necessarily be able to learn otherwise. And we're losing some of those lessons because the way that we're approaching sports right now. But I also think, to your point, Jon, about visibility, I think that does have sort of a second part of it, in that we were speaking briefly about sort of the gender discrepancies in some of these issues about access and opportunity. And I think a big part of that is visibility, as far as having female athletes be very visible, I think is a really great thing, because I think it encourages young girls and women who might not necessarily engage in a sport to say, oh, she's doing this, like, look at this soccer player on TV, I want to do that, I can do that. So I think there are some really good things about that visibility that draws people into the game, but you're absolutely correct that there are some challenges that also creates.
And not to make Neeru you our default science man and the statistics man.
Wasn't like that in high school.
But there are truly, and most of the research suggests, right, that there are true benefits to being a multi-sport athlete.
I get asked a lot of how can you prove that multi-sport play will lead to elite level success, and we've published multiple papers on this and had position statements from the academies that says that obviously we feel that there is great benefit. I ask people, why don't you prove to me there is not one publication that says that specialized and intense early play will lead to elite level success? There's plenty of anecdotal stories, which is different, but there's not. If you take a population of 1,000 kids and you actually ask them to intensify, we know that early talent ID programs, all these things have no data to support that. Asking for a college scholarship is a completely reasonable goal, I think, but if you set it up where I have a friend who has said, I have 2 kids, and I call them investment number 1 and investment number 2, and we're going to get them college scholarship. And I said, did you realize that at 8 to 10 years old, that the best they can do is meet expectations? It's like being an Indian kid and trying to be a doctor. Like, the best you can do is actually just be a doctor at the end, right? So if they don't do that, then all you've done is disappoint them. So they can either meet expectations or create disappointment. And that's a really cautious area.
And there have been stories about this, not to get too off track, but it's a misconception, because the fact is that the investment that you're going to make in private coaches and teaching outside of the revenue-producing sports as football, men's and women's basketball, that scholarship probably isn't going to cover the cost of the investment you've made. It might give your child an advantage in getting into a particular college, a highly selective college, because they're an athlete, but they're not going to get the money back. Chris, the programs that you guys have done recently, you've got some toolkits that you've put together, and I want to know what they are and whether they are applicable to other sports, whether it be tennis, hockey, basketball, given our panel.
Yeah, so the program that we came out with is called Play Ball, and the whole concept is just to play baseball in any format. You don't have to be on a team, you don't have to have umpires, you don't have to have uniforms. And so we basically created a toolkit that you can download that has a bunch of different game formats, and we partnered with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So there's mayors of, I think, 3,000 cities across the country that are in this group. And we partnered with mayors to put on events in cities that just show kids that are different ways to play baseball. Run the bases, play catch, play wiffle ball, play home run derby, all these different types of event formats. And so we have kids now that are coming out to these events and just, they've never seen these formats before. They didn't understand that you could have a wiffle ball home run derby game, or that you could just come out and run the bases and have 2 guys run the bases against each other and see who was faster. And so there's all these different formats that kids are now getting exposed to, and then what we see is that they're taking that back into their communities. And so 300 kids come out to an event, they experience baseball in a different format, and then when they go home with the 6 other kids in their community, they might play run the bases, or they might play wiffle ball, home run derby, and these types of things. And I think we take that for granted that kids are just going to figure it out. I think you have to show them. You have to give them examples. And so when they see something that's fun, they'll take that with them. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that we've had, is that you actually get a lot of value from providing those kids exposure. In terms of takeaways for other organizations, I think all the leagues now, I think, are starting to wake up to the fact that they need to have some sort of program to encourage activity. The NFL has Play 60, which is more of a broader just activity program. But the NBA has Junior NBA now. I think all the leagues are realizing that they serve an important role in as role models to show people ways to play the sport and ways to be active. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that we're seeing, is that the leagues really need to fill that role.
Caitlin, you're obviously partial to hockey, I think, but what would you say to young girls, or what do you say to young girls in terms of getting out on the blacktop or on the pond?
Yeah, I mean, I just think there are so many great ways to be active and to engage and to participate in different types of not just sports, but just activities where you are running around and having fun and playing. I mean, I think that's so important. It doesn't have to be an organized sport. I mean, I spent so many hours of my life growing up playing tag or playing kick the can, which is still one of my favorite games. I mean, so many of my childhood memories are just of games like that. And I think sometimes when you structure everything just as organized sports, it can maybe discourage or intimidate certain kids. That's maybe not their thing. But there are so many different ways to get active and to get engaged that we just need to keep promoting these ideas and providing information to parents and to communities so that you can facilitate opportunities for kids to get involved, because there's so many great ways to get involved out there.
I don't know how many times, I mean, to Chris's point, I don't see kids playing stickball anymore, and that seemed so old-fashioned. Neeru, I don't know how often I see kids. It's much harder to get to a tennis court, and you need somebody to play with, whether it's a pro or a friend. How often do you see kids just take a tennis racket and a ball and find a wall, a garage door?
It's disturbing for me to hear how much a tennis ball is used for other sports besides tennis. But we did that as well, too. USTA and a lot of tennis organizations have actually pushed this, so we have access for tennis for the 10 and under, where you don't need fancy equipment, you can do it on your driveway, and it's really a big push, just like all the other organizations. And I think it is a semi-organized way to introduce some sort of innovation on your own to try to help create these environments. We just bought a new home in Atlanta. I'm just thinking, how am I going to shape that driveway to fit my tennis court for my 3-year-old? So those opportunities are there, but I think these organizations do help, and athletes like yourself and how the media portrays promotion of this, and many of you in the audience can really help message this. I think we're on the right track.
Jason, do you still see people playing what we call 21 or one-on-one-on-one, and sometimes there were 7 people playing one-on-one-on-one?
Oh yeah, there's definitely pickup games going on. I just took a trip to China, which is crazy. In the Forbidden City, I saw people playing pickup basketball. It's, I mean, I love how basketball is a global sport, and you can go to your local park and still see people playing pickup basketball. That's how I got better, was actually going with my father to pick up basketball games, going against people who were adults. And yeah, as a kid, it sucked. I got beat up a little bit. But when I started playing against kids my own age, I was much more aggressive, much more physical, ready to handle contact. And in contact sports, you have to be strong. And it definitely helped my game playing in those pickup games with
And
my
in
dad.
those situations, I'm guessing, same thing with Caitlin on street hockey, there was no official.
No, just call your own fouls, and you get in arguments, and it's kind of funny. I actually play USTA tennis in the USA Tennis League, and on Saturday in my match, it got a little testy. Our opponents hit an overhead, and it went right past my partner's head, and my partner got upset and started getting a confrontation. I was like, wait, I retired. I stepped away from this, what is happening right now? And let's take a step
Conflict
back.
resolution.
Oh
on your
yeah,
own.
conflict resolution. Was
Chair umpired.
Yeah, let's remember we're playing tennis.
Hey,
Let's open it up. We've got a little less than 15 minutes left, so I see a hand right there in my eye line. Go ahead.
So, Jon, I'm a parent of a 9-year-old, okay, and I'm 52 years old. So when I was a kid, I played till dark as well. It's sort of an elephant in the room, though, that parents aren't going to let their kids out of their sight right now. So when we're thinking about free play, it's really with a whole different light, and I think Chris is on it, which is this notion that free play has to almost be structured in this day and age, because it's just not it's not realistic for many parents to imagine letting their kid go out and play kick the can like we did until 9, 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. I mean, who's doing that these days as a parent? You're not going to do that. So the lens of today's free play is a different lens, and I think the fact that the leagues are beginning to acknowledge that. And it's a really tough balance to strike. There's not a question. It's just an observation as a parent thinking, I'm not going to let my kid do free play the way I did. It's just not going to happen. And it's not. I'm not misty about that. It's just a reality. I got to find a different way for that to happen. And I think those challenges are real. And I think that it's not a simple solution.
I think there are also some economic realities to it as well. I know that growing up in New York, and there were rec centers open on the weekend nights where kids could go play. So yes, it was organized in the sense that somebody had to open up the doors and turn on the lights. But other than that, it was free play. And I know Tom and I have spoken about this, that in places like Baltimore, where there used to be many, many rec centers, and because of economics, they've shut down.
Hi. I wanted to comment on that. My name is Ted Crichton. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. And I run an organization called Joy of the People. 6 years ago, we set about that same thing, where I was running a very big, high-pressure soccer club as a coaching director. And when the kids turned older, I saw they didn't have the capability or sort of the overall health as a soccer player to make it in, they were burning out. And so we partnered with the city of St. Paul to take over a rec center and try to build free play and see if we could do it within soccer. And so what we found is that actually free play is the best practice. In other words, one of the reasons that it's dying is that people see organized structured sports as the best way to develop. And in soccer, for instance, most of the great players have grown up playing free play. In fact, in Minnesota, we had a great environment of free play that produced the many players on the 1960 hockey team. They all played out of St. Paul Field and Park. And then later in that group came Herb Brooks. So I just think that we have to really respect free play. And then the really interesting thing is when Caitlin was doing her free play hockey, she didn't expect to get better. She was only doing it because it was fun. But unless you do that, if you try to do free play to get better, it doesn't work. But you have to do it. And then later comes more deliberate stuff.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes.
Hi. One of the groups that I think Jeremy represented was kids with disabilities. I'm a child psychiatrist, and my population, my people, are kids with anxiety disorders, ADHD, depression, autism. And these kids don't do well in team sports. They don't do well playing well with others. They need a lot of help, but they need to be active. And part of the treatment is activity. So we need to develop venues that these kids can start and participate. I mean, I think one of the things that I've done is I've developed a therapy group that uses Taekwondo and families, and they work together, and it's a 13-week group, and then they go through different levels. But I think that it's just an example of the type of different sports and different activities that we can do to sort of create a free play opportunity. So anyway, any comments?
Are we too limited in, we think of the 4 big sports, but you were telling me there's 26, what's the number?
26 major sports. We actually have, in our data, we had about something like 30 to 35 sports out of 1,200 athletes represented. So there's a lot more sports than just the major sports. To everyone's point about the free play, I would add, actually, some of our work is trying to look at parent and child interactions and actually what I call family free play, and the amount of time that you exercise with your son or daughter. We took a group of specialized parents or kids who specialize in a sport and kids who had multi-sport activities, and the parents of kids with multi-sport activities were 3 to 4 times more likely to exercise at least 1 hour a week with their child. And so it gives you that supervision. It's still fun, and we've run combined tennis tournaments with adults and kids, and I think there has to be some element of the parent being involved. Otherwise, the process may not be successful in today's world.
Anybody? Let's go all the way back here. Oh, sorry. We've got 2 over here, so we'll start there and we'll move back this way. We've got a few more minutes.
Good morning, panelists. My name is Mark Maxey. I'm with U.S. Youth Soccer on a national committee called Soccer Across America. Hearing the keynote and other things, something that comes to put on the board is that there should be skills-enriched free play. So there's some learning that's happening, but not learning towards specialization, learning towards discovery. But skills-enriched free play, and if children have the skills, they'll want to play the game.
An interesting point. And that's, Jason, that's to your point about your nieces and nephew,
Yeah,
right?
we're just trying to get them the basics of dribbling the basketball and shooting, and it's the basics, the fundamentals of the sport.
Well, and I think it's sort of what Jeremy was talking as well. The better you are at something, the more inclined you are to do it, right?
Yeah, and also part of the reason why I love tennis, I think, is because as a kid, that was the one sport that my entire family, we all played together. So I have a lot of fond memories, fun memories from playing tennis because of that interaction with my parents and my brother all being on the court at the same time.
The gentleman over here. Yep.
Hello, my name is Jorge Pettis with the YMCA. You guys have all spoken about free play in sports. A few mentioning of organizations that have kids in which they are already gathered, like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. And then it was mentioned earlier that kids are not getting PE and physical activity as part of their schooling anymore. How do we introduce free play, and how are you doing that in organizations that already have kids gathered, in after-school programs, in summer camp programs, in schools? And then how do you tie physical activity with social emotional development? I know those are 2 very different questions, but I'm curious how youth development principles are being integrated in this notion of free play.
Anybody want to address that?
I mean, it's a tough question. I think you're essentially trying to connect the educational and development aspect with the activity aspect, and I think that link we haven't necessarily gotten there yet. I think a lot of the sports organizations are focusing on just getting kids out, getting them out of the house, and I think there's a final step that needs to be taken to really focus on education and development. For one of the programs that we've done that's started to move us in this direction is a program called Fun at Bat, which is geared for younger kids, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and it's really about skills development, like we talked about, but it's also about social development, teaching kids how to work together in teams, broader skills that are above and beyond sports. And so I think that's honestly the next step, and my personal assessment is that we haven't really gotten there yet, but I think that's where you need to go, because sports, I think, is probably one of the best tools that we can use to develop people, and if the schools aren't going to do it, then the sports organizations need to, I think, step in and help do that.
Yes?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Brooke Curran with Running Brook. I'd really like to know if the panelists have heard of a book called Spark by Dr. John Rady. And if you haven't, I encourage everyone to pick it up. It links activity with the benefit, not social benefit, physical benefit, just as the obesity and everything that we're talking about this morning, but also linking how getting kids moving makes them better learners in school. And so I'd like to know kind of what you all think of that, but then how we interact with our cities and our school systems to plan for parks and other things that can encourage neighborhood development and getting all kids outside?
I'm only a doctor, so I don't have the resources to get those parks going, but I'm all for it, and that's why you need organizations to back it up. I will say that the kids we talked about who come from underserved areas have the right playing patterns that we want to see. So access for underserved environments is poor, but those that are in those, they're actually participating in sports, do it properly. So increasing those environments is a major goal for every benefit you all know about. And that's why you need major organizations to actually invest in those areas. So we have the overutilizers that we're trying to do some free play. We need the underutilizers, really, which is the rest of the country, to engage in more activity. I think maybe you guys have some deep pockets and you can help us.
And then I think
go ahead.
also just to add, Caitlin and me, we do some work with the Let's Move Active Schools, and which goes into schools and encourages kids to get 60 minutes of physical activity every day. So going to those schools and, you know, working with like the 100-mile club, where you try to get 100 miles in with the kids and participating with them. I think when the kids really buy in, and the teachers, the schools, with the Let's Move Active Schools, I think that's a great way to encourage physical activity.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, too, that this is a question about, you know, this requires communities. You know, this is families, this is individuals, this is communities working together to try to promote these opportunities for kids. I mean, it's an infrastructure question as much as anything else. And to your point about what you might call sort of the holistic value of sports participation, there's no question. I think everyone on the stage, from personal experience, can say, you know, I feel better about life when I'm an active person. I mean, I feel better than when I'm not active. I mean, it's just no question to me. I mean, I've learned not only so many lessons, life lessons from playing sports, but for me, I've learned how I want to live my life through playing sports. And so I think that value that you're talking about is so important. And that's the kind of, you know, information and insight that we definitely need to keep promoting.
Just to share a thought here, do we have a microphone over here that we could bring to Jane right here? Jane, can I get you to, and the reason why, to your point that you brought up about in the schools, and Jane is from Miami-Dade, and could you just give us in 45 seconds your experiences and the time constraints?
We have daily physical education in the elementary schools taught by a certified physical education teacher. So we know it can be done. Miami-Dade is the 4th largest school district, 355,000 students. The issue that we struggle with is getting daily recess for 20 minutes in. That we do have, on top of daily physical education, we do have a policy for 3 days a week, but getting those other 2 days a week, because there's only a certain number of minutes in a day, and when you have foreign language, art, music, coding, and other things now going into the elementary school, to get something else in, we're afraid something else is going to come out. So we're struggling with that, but we're working through it. But free play is so critically important, especially active kids do better, the brain activation. There's so much evidence-based research now. Kids need to play. It's great for socialization, great for academic performance, and it's just, that's the life of a child, play. So thank you.
Thanks, Jane, appreciate it. Yeah, we got just time for probably one last one here, if they're holding me to the clock.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Smith. I'm with the Bay Area Women's Sports Initiative, also known as Bossy. And I want to make sure we don't gloss over the discussion around gender in free play in sports, because our organization works in schools where 93% of the children are receiving free lunches. 78% of those children are the primary translators for their families. And they come from families from all over the world where sports and girls do not go together. So when I go out to those playgrounds at recess and at lunch, I see a whole lot of boys playing and not so many girls. A lot of girls on the lunch tables, a lot of girls hanging out on the sidelines. And we have found that a woman coach, a woman role model out on those playgrounds makes a huge difference. And suddenly you get a bunch of girls moving and active and playing all different kinds of games. And it's not the 20%, so I'm pretty sure Caitlin, nobody was gonna keep her off the playground at lunch or at recess. It's the 80% of the girls who don't normally jump in that we are trying to reach. So my question for you guys who are doing these great programs with some big backing behind you is, how many women coaches are you including in those programs? Are you really looking at your numbers of girls that are participating? And how can we get more?
Yeah, the NBA partners with the WNBA. I took a sports envoy trip with Shanae Ogumike, also went to Stanford, Bay Area. And Shanae was talking about this, the dynamic of coming from a family where sports wasn't encouraged by her family. Her family is from Nigeria, and trying to break down those walls. And it's important, like Caitlin said, to have visibility, to have an athlete like Shanae and the great WNBA athletes who participate throughout NBA Cares and the junior NBA. Visibility is so important. And you can also look at the Women's World Cup and how they had huge ratings and how that can inspire young girls and inspire their families to say, okay, it's okay to let encourage my daughter to play in sports, and visibility is key.
I think we are just about out of time in here. I know that I'm supposed to encourage you, although I don't know the exact room, but in one of the neighboring rooms, if you want to continue to discuss this and talk to some of the panelists for a little bit, we've got time to do that. And I think there's something else coming up in here next, but I don't know what that is. Is Tom in here? Is somebody who knows something?
There's Tom right there.
There's Tom. There's somebody who knows something.
Great panel, by the way, John.
Tom, I think I got it.
You got the jump
Don't they
rope
have to
and
jump
ball.
rope now?
I thought I killed you already.
Minor wound. I've been told, and there's a lot of talk about, and this was a great panel, thank you very much, but I've been told that for the next 10 minutes, there's a break.
Yes.
And there's a lot of kids outside with these things and these things. So what we want to try and do is match the audio that we heard in here with the video of you actually moving. So, and the people from Bowsy, I think, is it Bowsy or Bossy? Bossy? B-O-W-S-I is Bossy? Okay, all right. We understand the people from Bossy are leading the way out there, and we want to see people playing with the kids for a while because that will put a smile on everybody's face. How's that? Okay?
Special thanks to the panelists, please.
Good job with that, man.
Yeah, it's really good.
Good job out there. We'll have to hit sometime.
Oh, yes.
Great. Can we just meet again? Thank you. Yeah.
Good job, Caitlin.
This is how it could become discovered.
I mean, I tried it from the